So I'm going to start with a basic opportunity to get clear on innovation in your own world by asking you to do one very simple thing. I'd like you to make a list of 5 things that show that you are innovative. So it could be anything, something you've done before, something you've thought of. It could be because your mother, when you were 6 years old, told you that you are innovative or creative. It could be that your job is doing that every day and your partner at your work told you today that you're very innovative. Anything you can think of that shows that you're innovative. And if you get those 5 and you're done, I'm going to ask you to do the exact opposite and make a list of 5 things that show you're not so innovative. Again, same thing. Could be stuff you did before, stuff you failed to do, somebody that told you that you're not so smart. Any of those things you could put down. And once you've done that, if you could type into the box on text, just your name and one thing from each list. One thing that you feel shows you're innovative, one thing you feel shows you're not. And then we can all see what each other is thinking about. One of the things that I know that for me that shows I'm not so innovative is, do you know that Zoom allows you to put a fake background behind you? And I tried it, and I really couldn't come up with the one I liked. You know, there's like trees that look very close, and you seem like a very small person in these big trees, and then they have a city thing which doesn't look right because it's not the city we're in, and a lot of things like that. So I suppose I'm not that innovative because I couldn't find the background that would work. But I am innovative because I train people in how to be innovative, so there must be innovative.
From DN Chapter 1, I have created my own L. Okay, so how do you, where do you do it, Michael?
Just type it into the chat.
Into where?
If you don't know how to do chat, we'll teach you another time. You can just say it out loud. So Dion, you found that you only improve what already is. You don't create new things. Would you say it's fair to say that if you could have a breakthrough, it could be around creating new things rather than just improving?
To be honest, Mike, I really had to invent something that I didn't think I was innovative about. So that's kind of a stretch.
Okay. All right. It's a big stretch.
And I guess the only reason I put it in there is that I heard someone once say that innovation is different to improving what already is. I, of course, have a different opinion, but I thought I'd put it in as a sort of devil's advocate statement.
Okay, so you find it much easier to make a list of things that you're creative, innovative with? Much easier.
Yeah, that list just goes on and on.
Fantastic. And some people find it the opposite. So it's hard on this format to say raise your hand because half the people are in the dark. But basically, you know who you are. Have a thought. Did you find it easier to do the first list or the second list, right? And it doesn't matter which one you found easier. It's just important to realize which one it is. Okay. So would anybody like to address any of the stuff you're typing in the text box, or are you happy with it? Okay. So, Jillian, you're unable to see the big picture. You're too detail focused, so you play it safe. Okay.
Yep, that's me.
So for you, if you were able to stop seeing too much detail and see the big picture, would that be a breakthrough for you?
Yeah, it would. I think I'm afraid of big goals. Like I know that there's opportunity to be more innovative and expand more, but I get really, really scared when it seems like a scary thing, and I'm not often creative enough or innovative enough to see, to kind of see it through. Yes. In terms of how do I make it work, and I kind of stop myself at that's scary, and then I don't think beyond that as to, well, how you're going to make it work, how can you achieve the scary goal or the big picture. So I kind of go, well, I'm in my comfort zone, let me just leave it in my comfort zone because it's scary otherwise, and then I limit the opportunity for us to grow, the business to grow, global expansion. I've limited us a lot because of that.
Got you. So it's quite a big limit, actually. It makes a big impact on your work.
It does.
Okay, so if you were to have a breakthrough in that tonight, would that be useful to you?
That would be massively useful to me because I'm going to overseas to the UK in January to explore the opportunity for the first time, and I'm petrified. So yes.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, I mean, it's not cool that you're petrified, but cool that you have a clear goal of what would actually make a big impact for you, right?
Yeah, and I think I'm afraid that I won't be able to expand my thinking and be innovative enough to adapt to a different market because I'm very comfortable here. And I think for me to be able to step out of my usual thinking patterns of play it safe would definitely help me in terms of seeing the opportunity, I think, when I go over there. And it might be different to what I'm comfortable with.
It will definitely be different from what you're comfortable with, right?
Yep. Yes.
So the question will be, is that okay or not?
That's okay. It has to be okay because I want it. I want to be pushed out of my comfort zone. I really do. I'm at this space where that's what I know I need to do.
Well, let's start doing that now. So have you had the experience in the past or even in the present, because of the limits you're talking about or some other limits, that a project you'd really like to see finished got stuck and didn't get finished?
Yes.
Okay.
Many times. I love to come up with ideas. I come up with a lot of ideas, but when I start realizing that it requires, it's out of my comfort zone and it requires a different thought pattern, I stop and I go, no, let's just stick to what you know. So many times I've had like an inkling of an idea of something that would be phenomenal, and then I talk myself out of it going, that's too big for you, and you're not creative enough for that, and just stick to what you know. So yes, definitely.
Yeah, okay, cool. I mean, again, not cool that you have that experience, but cool that you're clear, right? So yes. the next list I want you guys to do is a list of a few projects that you didn't finish, or they're never getting finished, even if you think they might someday, or you might never even have started them. These are any projects that were important to you that you left behind or are still struggling to get done for whatever reason. So if you can make a list of a few of those. Dion, you might even have one or two of these, eh? And since this is a very sad thing to do, to write down the projects that you haven't managed to get done, I'm going to go back to the music we were playing when we started for 2 minutes, so you can finish your list in some kind of pleasure. All right. Has everybody gotten down a couple projects?
Yep.
Okay, you can type in, you always type in the chat if you want to share anything. Dion's talking about working on creating a masterclass division in the company, but it hasn't happened yet. I have a little bit of knowledge of that one. Anybody else want to share the project that really jumps out at you? Is there something you want to get done? It's not happening. You can share out loud or you can type in the chat. Either way works. Not putting our courses online, launching our e-learning platform. Jillian, a lot of e-learning, a lot of learning going on in this call. I know, Beth, you're going to be doing some kind of online class too, right? Finishing my online course. Yes, that's right. Okay. So does everybody have one project at least there that's very important to you that you want to get done? Because basically, okay. Sorry?
Definitely.
Okay. So, I mean, because basically the full, 8-week workshop that we do is all designed around and focused on the class. I'm sorry, on the project that you want to get done and actually putting it through a process that's different than the normal process people go through, which gives you a clarity on how to be creative and innovate in that project, and then therefore like using it as a basis for all things you might do, right? So for tonight, those of you that are just here for tonight, it's, tonight we still have the opportunity to look at how would you apply what we talk about tonight to that specific project. So it's very important you have a project you really care about and that you really are truly a bit bewildered as to how to make it move. Does everybody have that? I'm going to go with yes. Okay, now having done those exercises, I'd like you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 compared to other people as an innovator. Where would you go on the scale of 1 to 10? Just type it in the text, your number from 1 to 10. Dion's an 8. Nicole's an 8. So far, we're doing well. Because me, I'm an 8. Got lots of 8s. Anybody else? The number?
Can you hear me? Can you hear us?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Hey, Kathy.
Quick, guys. Boom, boom, boom.
Between a 9 and 10, Michael.
Putting yourself on a 10. Okay.
Okay, Don.
Absolutely.
No, I've done it about a 7.
Okay, that's a lot of noise. So anybody else want to give us a rating? You don't have to. But right now we're seeing is that people's ratings are very high tonight, right? We have 7s, 8s, 10s. The other people, oh, we got some more coming in. We got a 9 from Jillian. My goodness, we're a good group here. 7 or 8 for Beth. Great. Okay. So here's the reason I asked that. We're doing really well. The State of Create study that Adobe does every few years, the average person actually ranks himself a 4 out of 10, right? So if you're ranked above 4, you're already doing better than the average person in that survey. And what's interesting about this survey also is that not only is it the average 4, which is weird because an average should always probably be 5, 70% of the people in the study say they're not living up to their creative potential, right? Now, quick question I want to start with before we get deeper into the question of creativity and innovation is, what is innovation? And I mean, the simplest definition is simply that innovation is simply creativity in action, right? Whereas this diagram here says creativity with a job to do. Creativity is thinking, innovation is doing. These are the kind of distinctions people make between the two, right? And one of the reasons that this workshop went from being a creativity workshop to an innovation workshop is that the way I'm positioning innovation is really just exactly this, that it's creativity with one final step, right? And it's a step that we all really want to have in our life, which is getting the job done. So the first part of creativity is getting an idea or the idea. The final part of it is actually implementing it, right? That makes innovation. So these are some of the questions that one can look at very simply when you're looking at the difference between creativity and innovation. You take the idea that you have created in the creative process, and you can see, you know, how to make it viable in the marketplace, how to make it possible with existing technology, how to make it desirable or marketable to an end user, and that's an innovation process. And you basically, you know, if you look at these words, you'll see that the words all go back to that same thing we started with, that creativity is around ideas, thoughts, concepts. Innovation is around actions and doing and measurable value and products. So it all makes sense, right? So why do we need to innovate today? And obviously, some of you on this call already know the answer to this very strongly in your work, right? You already have work that demands it. But let me just summarize some things that make it, you know, complete for you. We all know about the fourth industrial revolution and how today is some part of the beginning or early days of the fourth industrial revolution, and the integration of cyber systems and physical systems, the use of multiple different technologies to create a sort of reduction of the gap between humans and robots and so forth. These are some of the physical technological aspects of 4IR, right? Things like big data, Internet of Things, cloud computing, and so forth. But what is interesting to a lot of people, including myself, is not each of these specific technologies, but what's really interesting is where the technologies are actually not solving the problems, right? And that is to be found on the list of the skills of the future, which is made by the World Economic Forum, brought to you by the same people that actually invented 4IR in the first place. Right? They have a list of 10 skills which are going to be valuable or very important in the next 2 months from now, 2020, right? If you look at this list, you'll see that the top 3 skills are actually all creative thinking skills. And I'm going to come back to this a bit later in this session. The top 3 skills are problem solving, which is really the whole creative process, critical thinking, which is part of the process, and creativity itself, which I think they mean the moment of ideation by that, right? And they also have decision making, which is necessary as part of creative thinking, and cognitive flexibility, which pretty much is also adaptability and creativity, very, very critical things today, right? So if you look at some things that are being said about creativity, the WEF also says that creativity is replacing capital as the most important element of business, right? So that's a pretty big deal to say that. Forbes calls creativity the skill of the future, and the future is now. LinkedIn, about 10 months ago, published an article that said that the best investment you can make is creativity. IBM says it's a critical factor in the success of a company and in their leaders. The Adobe State of Create survey has numbers like this: 84 to 86% of those surveyed said being creative makes people better at all of these things. Better leaders and better workers, better students and better parents. And it's far better numbers than any politician will ever get, right? So another numbers from the Adobe survey, between 73 and 83% saying that investing in creativity brings increased productivity, satisfied customers, better experience, better innovation, obviously, and more financial success. 73%, right, of people agree that more financial success from being more creative. There's a lot of other benefits to creativity that I'm not going to touch on tonight, but they are on the website. They're in the manual if you're in the workshop, and around health, mental health, physical health, happiness. Generally, creative thinking brings a lot of benefits to a person's life, right? Besides business benefits. So the intentions of the workshop, the whole workshop, is to learn new ways of approaching innovation, understand your own mind better and how to shift its contents around, to recreate an innovation style of your own, and I'll tell you what I mean by that later, and to make progress in the project, right? Tonight, I'm very committed that you get some level of all of these things just tonight, right? Now, we know what innovation is. What is creativity? If we look at Wikipedia, Wikipedia is obviously the truth, right? So it must be right. In any case, what it says is that creativity is the production of something new, original, and valuable. Now, Dion, you were just talking earlier about how you don't necessarily believe that new is 100% necessary. Can you say something about that?
Sorry, just unmuting there.
Yeah.
Yes, because I don't think there is anything new under the sun. I think that's just a fact. Everything we think is built on previous thoughts, built on the ideas of others. I mean, nobody can imagine a color they've never seen before, because that would be new, and we don't know how to do that. But we can imagine colors similar to the ones we've seen before. So yeah. I think innovation is about adding to what is to create something that seems new.
Yeah. Fantastic, because we're going to look at that specific thing in just a minute, but also the question I'm asking is, what does Wikipedia say? Creativity has to be something new. It seems like a bit of a stretch, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're basically saying yourself that there's not such a thing. So new, I don't know, right? Original.
Sure. I mean, again, in a kind of a context, not in the sense of new, but in the sense of different.
Well, Picasso said this, right? The bad artists imitate, the great artists steal. Now, this particular item is a rock on which this is carved, and Banksy has crossed out Picasso's name and scratched his own name there, which I think is a nice statement, right? But it gets weirder, because if you go back and look at the original quote, it seems that Stravinsky, who was a contemporary of Picasso and in fact a friend of Picasso's, actually said, a good composer does not imitate, he steals. But actually, he actually said lesser artists borrow, great artists steal. But actually, it was T.S. Eliot in 1920 who published in an essay that quote, immature poets imitate, mature poets steal. Now, he actually published that. It's actually in print. The others are not, right? And in fact, as it turns out, the earliest confirmed quotation of Picasso saying that quote was by Steve Jobs in an interview in the 1980s, in which he said that Picasso said that. In fact, it seems that there's no evidence that Picasso ever said that at all, right? But Dali did say that those who don't want to imitate anything produce nothing. David Bowie did say the only art I'll ever study is stuff that I can steal from. Quentin Tarantino said that great artists steal, they don't do homages. Woody Guthrie said he's the biggest song stealer there was. Paul Mooney stole jokes. Woody Allen was a shameless thief. And Albert Einstein supposedly, which doesn't make any sense to me, but supposedly said the secret to creativity is knowing how to hide your sources, which he's just done. So really just raising the question again, what is original, right? The idea that creativity must be original seems kind of a farce when all of these very well-known and well-respected people have pretty much said that they're not original and that they steal everything they work on in some way, right? So if it's not new and it's not original, Oh, here's Anna Quindlen saying the same thing. Every story's already been told. There's only like 6 stories that you can tell, and they've all been told. So all that's new or original is the way that you do it, right? What about valuable? New, original, and valuable. So how do we know what valuable is, or what, what that even means, right? So this definition of creativity in Wikipedia, which is the truth, somehow isn't the truth after all. So how do we understand creativity if we're going to go through a number of weeks, some of us, and another hour or so, some of us, going through that and saying, well, wait a minute, what is it that we're talking about, right? First of all, one of the things you can say creativity is curiosity. But everybody agree that in order to be creative, you have to be curious. Anybody here disagree with that? Now, again, I can't see most of you, but just type into the box if you're not there, physically if you're on camera, raise your hand. Are you willing to be more curious? Raise your hand if you're willing to be more curious, or just type yes like Jillian did in the box. Dion, you're not willing to be more curious. Are you still there, Dion? You're frozen. Whoa. Okay, everybody says yes. So everybody's willing to be more creative, right? Everybody wants to be more creative. Everybody wants to be more curious. Raise your hand or say yes or no. Are you willing to be more uncertain? Would you like to be more uncertain? Raise your hand, Dion, if you'd like to be more uncertain. Type in the box yes or no if you'd like to be more uncertain. Okay, well, Einstein said he was just curious. He had no other talent, right? Here's the problem, is that uncertainty is a critical part of the definition of creativity. And this is where it can get a little bit weird. Okay, Jillian says she's scared of uncertainty, right? And that's a very normal thing. Most people, they'll have their hand up, say, I'm very, very excited to be creative. I'm very excited to be more curious. And then if you say you want to be more uncertain, the hand will come down, right? Because people want certainty, they want clarity, they don't want to be uncertain. But the problem is that in order to be more creative, no matter what level you are, whether you're an 8 or a 9 or a 7 or a 3 in your mind, right? You need to be willing to be more uncertain than you are, because it's only to be compared to yourself, right? And let me show you what I mean by that. Oh, Dion, you ever have this experience in your corporate work? You're muted. Say again?
Sorry, I just missed, the internet froze for about a minute there, so I missed the question.
I said, have you ever had this happen in your work?
I think that's a daily occurrence.
Right? So it's ironic, but it's actually the way that our own brain thinks as well. It's not just a company that thinks that way. It's actually the way our mind works, right? If we look at how our brain processes information, a lot of people like to talk about thinking outside the box. Now, a couple of you will already know what I'm going to say about this, so don't ruin it for the others. But how many people here would like to think outside the box? Would you like to learn to think outside the box more regularly in a better way? Anybody? Okay. John, you'd like to think outside the box? Anybody else? Just type in the text. Okay, well, if you'd like to start thinking outside the box, please wipe that out of your brain. Don't do it, right? It's a word or a phrase that was created in the late 1960s by a guy in a corporate situation, and it actually is attributed to a specific person who really damaged a lot of people's thinking about how to think. Right? Thinking outside the box is not something that we do very well as humans. Has anybody ever been told to think outside the box and then done it successfully? Because most people ask that question, they, the experience of trying to think outside the box is very frustrating, right? It's something that you don't know where to go with. Is that true for you guys? Okay. So go back to the cubicle and start thinking outside the box. Again, this is the way your brain talks to itself, right? You put pressure on yourself to try to think in unusual ways or creative ways that are different than usual. And we phrase it as thinking outside the box, when in fact, we need to start thinking into boxes better, right? Because the bottom line is human beings think in boxes. All animals think in boxes. It's actually the way that we survive, right? Even a lizard will say, can I eat this thing or can I not eat this thing? Will it kill me or must I kill it? Is it dangerous or not? Those kind of questions. If it can't put them into clear boxes, it doesn't know what to do, right? So as long as it can put them in clear boxes, it knows what to do, it knows how to take action, and it can survive. If it didn't do that, it would literally sit there staring at the distance, having no idea what to do in the world. Make sense? Now, mammals are higher level than a lizard. They have more complex boxes, right? They have, for example, besides can I eat it, they have things like, what tricks can I do? Or do I love this person? So they have a more complex set of boxes. And here's the other thing. My dog, her name's Bon Bon. She eats carrots, right? Now, most dogs don't do that. She didn't always do that. But at one point, one day, she decided to, taste one, and she liked it. So she took the carrot, put it into the can I eat it box, right? And tried it and decided it belongs in that box. And now she keeps it in that box. If she sees a carrot, she'll eat it. That's how dogs learn new tricks as well, right? They are able to learn. And ultimately, creativity is really at the bottom of it, just the willingness and ability to change the nature of the boxes, right? So if my dog was unwilling to change what she eats, then she would not be able to learn. But because she can, she's able to learn and able to take in new things and learn new ways of being, right? But not a lot. Now, the problem with humans is, the challenge with humans is, we have so many boxes, right? So many boxes. And the boxes are much more complicated and complex. And we love to put stuff in them, don't we? I mean, think about how much every day you judge things and put them into boxes. How many times on this call already have you made a judgment? Maybe about other people on the call, about me, about the way the internet is. Have you made judgments on the course of this call in the last 39 minutes? Maybe the music I played you don't like or you like, right? Is it good for you? Is it bad for you? Is it right or wrong? Is this person there going to be useful or not? Are you learning something or not? We make judgments all the time. It's all we do. We just keep making judgments and make more judgments and make more judgments, right? I mean, we are basically judgment machines, human beings. We do it constantly. In fact, the only two things that humans do better than other animals, it seems to me, is judge things and be creative, right? And there's a tension between the two, because the more we judge things into the boxes that exist, the more we're not being creative. So when I say be uncertain, I'm saying that we need to start being willing to question the boxes that we've built up over the course of our entire lives, right? And that even includes the boxes that say, I'm a 10 in creativity. Now, what I'll promise you is that as you go through the world, shifting those boxes is harder than you think, right? You might have ranked yourself as an 8 or a 9 or a 10 in creativity, but being able to actually implement that vision that you have of your creativity isn't as easy as it seems, right? And if you don't believe me, I'll prove it to you. I promise you, in the nature of this call, right? So, this is just another way of saying don't think outside the box. So what the goal is, we want to do is try to start thinking into the same boxes we have, right? But we want to think into them differently. We want to look at the boxes we have in our brains and actually start to think, how can we put different things in those same boxes? How can we change the nature of the boxes we have? How can we combine them, make them bigger? anything we have to do to make them more flexible and make it easier for us to think of new things, right? That's much easier when we have the guidance of the existing patterns of thought we already have. The idea of thinking outside the box is basically to try to go outside of what we already have, which gives us nothing to work with, right? So, as an example, I'd like you to look at this string of letters and say which doesn't belong. You can say out loud if you like, or we can type into the text again, which doesn't belong. Okay, Dion says D. Anybody else have an answer? Or are we just going to stick with Dion? Yeah? You don't have your mic on. Hold on. Go ahead.
Okay. I.
And why do you say I?
Just visually, it doesn't fit there. Creatively, it doesn't fit there.
Creatively, it doesn't fit there. Okay. It's an interesting answer. Jillian says D. Any other answers?
I would say D because it's obviously a consonant and the rest are vowels.
Okay, I'm going to mute you now because someone's blowing their nose into the microphone. What about the other guys who are very quiet today? James, Jillian, Stalin, Tumadiso, welcome. Tumadiso says D. Beth says D. Okay, so most people say D. It's normal to say D. It's the thing most people say, right? I don't know how I got this circle. Are you guys seeing a circle on there? Very strange.
Yeah,
Hey,
we saw the circle.
Sorry?
We saw the circle.
I didn't put the circle there. I don't know where it's come from. Someone out there on the other side has circled D and now it's there.
I did. I'm the one who drew the circle.
Okay. I'm going to unshare it and then reshare it. Otherwise, that circle ain't going anywhere. Okay. So D is the most common answer, and we know it's because it's a consonant, right? But the fact is that the actual answer to the question, as I just told you a couple of minutes ago, you would do this, right? I said you would automatically want to be certain. You would automatically not want to think out of boxes. You would want to think into boxes, right? And that's exactly what you all did. Now, most of you said D. It doesn't matter which one you said. The actual answer is all of them. All of them don't belong with the others, right? I mean, you can come up with absolutely any explanation you want. I can say A is the only one that looks like a house, a roof, right? And if I was actually a guy that builds roofs, that would make sense to me. Okay, I is the only one that doesn't creatively belong, apparently. It's also the only one that represents myself. It's the only one that is a straight line. O is the only one you can play tic-tac-toe with. It's the only one that looks like a hula hoop, etc., right? There are many, many explanations for which one doesn't belong. U is the only one that looks like a gutter, the only one that refers to another person, spelled wrong, so forth. But you can see that there are many explanations for why each of them doesn't belong with the others that are perfectly valid and equally valid to the idea that a consonant doesn't belong with vowels, right? But you mostly have the idea that consonants and vowels are a box set that's very important, right? So you all leapt to the conclusion mostly that the answer is going to be D because it's a consonant. You know, and the only purpose of this exercise is really to prove the point to you that in case you don't believe it, that you, no matter how creative you are going to tend to think into your boxes that you already have. Very, very few people, very few, I've probably done this exercise with a couple hundred people now, and I think one person may have ever said instantly all of them. Otherwise, people never say that, you know. No one ever asks, what are the conditions? What are the criteria? No one ever asks me, what do you mean by that? Everyone jumps to a conclusion very quickly, right? Here's the thing, guys. Even though you know this, you're going to do it again and again and again, because that's the way humans deal with stuff. We think in these boxes. And the only really swift and clear way for us to increase and benefit ourselves creatively is to start getting clear on our boxes and start taking active and very progressive steps to change the nature of what we're willing to put in the boxes, right? So when you said you're not willing to be uncertain or you don't like being uncertain, you really meant it. Like, you don't like to give the answer that says, I don't know, or it's all of them, right? Here's an example of how a real company used the idea of thinking into the box to change the way that they worked. We all know BIC, right? Okay, so BIC makes pens. For about 30 years, that's all they did. From the late 1950s until, okay, more like 25 years. From the mid 1950s to the late 1970s, all they did was make cheap plastic disposable pens, right? They actually started as a company that made real pens, and then they started doing the disposable pens. And they spread from France throughout the world over the course of 2 decades. But eventually they ran out of spread, right? They ran out of places to go. So they started to think, how can we expand our company? And after much back and forth in thinking, they decided to think into the box. Any idea what they did? What does BIC make now? Anybody? You can talk or you can type, whatever works.
They make lighters. Don't they make lighters?
They make lighters, absolutely they do. Are the lighters plastic?
I don't know. I don't smoke. I actually don't know.
Lighters are plastic.
But I know they make lighters.
Okay, so they do make lighters. What else do they make?
I have no idea.
Stalin, James, anybody?
Walter says razors.
Razors is correct. The two main products they added were razors and lighters. They were all cheap, they were all plastic, and they were all disposable, but they were not pens, right? So this is an example of thinking into the box. They thought about what could they add to the box that would make sense. And they added these things, which are still cheap, plastic, and disposable, but not pens. Does that make sense? So that's the kind of exercise we need to go through in order to start shaping our minds to be more creative, is to start looking at how do we become more flexible with our boxes. To try to go into our boxes and think outside the box is stupid. It's like that old thing about a fish riding a bicycle, right? Like, it's just not what we do. We are experts at thinking into boxes. So let's use that to our benefit, right? How do we reshape the boxes we're thinking into to make it easier for us to think? Here's the only example, just for fun. I'm going to ask you to do this little puzzle for 5 minutes and see, can you figure out how to connect all the dots using 4 lines without picking up the pen, right? This is the only time in the entire workshop or anything I do where I will actually allow you to think outside the box. That's all I'm going to tell you. Now, the basic idea here is you want to okay, that would be 4 lines all connected, all going without lifting your pen, but it doesn't work, right? Because one of the dots is not inside. That would also be potentially correct, but it doesn't get all the dots.
No.
And although this gets all the dots with 4 lines, you would have to pick up your pen, right? So none of those work. But there is a way to get the answer to this question. 4 lines.
But the frame around it all.
I'm sorry?
Not the frame around it, the box around them all.
What about the box around it?
the actual square, doesn't that connect them all? Like they're all in the box. I mean, they're
No,
not.
it doesn't connect them
They're all in
because
the box.
they're inside of it, but they're not connected. I mean, literally connected.
Yeah, you mean okay.
So 5 minutes, see if anybody can solve it. Just as a little break in the thinking, because we've been talking a lot about thinking stuff, right? And in 5 minutes, we will carry on. All right, anybody get anything? Did anybody get an answer? Yeah, let's see. Let's see the answer. Hold it up. We don't see. Yeah, I think that's it. I can't see. Your camera is not good. Okay. Who's drawing on my screen again? You see, when you draw on the screen, I can't fix it after, so I have to undo it.
I don't even know, how do you draw on a screen? I'm curious as to how you can draw on the screen.
Well, who's doing it? I think it's Stalin or Kenya. Anyway, so none of these were the answers, but did we see the answer there? So the answer is to take this line, draw a line up. You guys, show them your answer again. Okay, can you see that? I still can't see it very well, but the point is, you have to go I'm not drawing well, but you have to go out. Anyway, you have to go out of the box, and it works. That's the only time you should go out of the box. Now, I have to reload this. Get rid of the lines. Okay, so the question we started from the beginning, we're talking about what innovation was, what creativity is. We look at the question of who is innovative. There's a couple people that say pretty basic things. Brene Brown says there's no such thing as creative or non-creative people. There's only people who use it or people who don't, right? And Michael Michalko, who wrote a book called Thinker Toys, very well-known thinker around creativity, said the only difference between people who are creative and people who are not is the belief that they are creative. So people who believe they're creative are, and people who believe they're not aren't, right? There's a study that was done, though, over 50 years ago. Well, it started over 50 years ago, ran for about 20 years. And it was done by a NASA scientist named George Land, who died about 2 years ago. He was a great thinker around creativity. He decided to go and test 5-year-old children to find out how creative they actually were. Some of you may have seen this before, so don't answer if you know it. But if you don't know, anybody want to guess the percentage of 5-year-olds that scored at genius level on creativity? Now, George Land knew what he was doing, right? He worked with NASA scientists and engineers to help them become more creative. Anybody want to guess how many 5-year-olds scored at genius level? We have 100 from Stalin. Not quite. Good guess. Not quite 100. It's actually 98% of 5-year-olds. 98% of 5-year-olds scored at genius level on creativity. He went back and tested the same children 5 years later at the age of 10. Stalin, since you took a guess the first time, you want to try again? How many of the kids at age 10 were still creative geniuses? What percent? There's a 10% on the board there. Stalin, what do you think? Any guesses? The answer is 30%. So somehow between the ages of 5 and 10, almost 70% of the children lost a good part of their creativity. Right? He went back and did the same kids at age 15. Any guess as to the percentage of kids at age 15 who still scored as creative geniuses? Anyone? 5. No, it was actually 12%. 12% scored at the same level they scored when they were 5 years old. So we went down from 98% of the children being top-notch geniuses in creativity to 12% by the age of 15. This got so depressing that rather than test the same kids again, George Land decided that maybe that there was something wrong with these kids. and he went off to, oh, we just lost somebody. And he went off to, okay, so he went off to test adults. He tested 280,000 adults, right? Big sample of population. Any guess how many % of adults still scored as creative geniuses? Anyone? 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 No guess. 35%, 20%, 2%. Okay, Mildred, you're the winner. 2% of adults still score at the level of 90% of 5-year-olds. Now, that includes you, right? So most likely when you were 5, you were a creative genius, and most likely you are not now, right? 2% of us on this call would be geniuses at that level, and there's not 50 of us on this call, so chances are none of us are creative geniuses at the level we were when we were 5. So there's a significant problem here, right? If all of us are creative if we say so, and if all of us are creative if we use it, what's going on? How did 96% of us lose huge amounts of creative abilities? Okay? What we know for sure is that we don't grow into our creativity, we grow out of it. So we're born with very high levels of creativity. And the more we start to build the boxes in our mind, right, the more we lose our creative thinking. Does that make sense? So again, our goal is how do we create more flexibility in our thinking so that we can actually be looser and freer in those boxes, right? I'm going to skip that game. I'm going to come to a definition of creativity that maybe we can work with, right? We looked at the other definition that we had before from Wikipedia, and we were finding it not so satisfactory. So if we look at this definition, it's called the 4 Ps, and it's based on person, place, product, and process, right? Now, to make this simple, person doesn't mean anything generally. It actually means that creativity is a characteristic of the person, meaning it's a character trait, right? So it's something that we all have at some level. I mean, would it be fair to say that in your experience, and you did this at the beginning of this workshop, so it should be fair to say that you are more or less creative than other people in your experience? Is that fair to say? Yes? Okay. So it makes some sense to say that creativity is a character trait. Some people have it, some people have less of it, right? In that case, you could call it a sort of memory issue, because in order to build that character trait, you had to remember how to be creative, right? You couldn't forget it. Now, the thing is that creativity, we've already seen that it's basically in everybody at the age of 5, right? And what that means, and this has been studied separately, is that people who, people who are twins have done studies of twins that have helped show that creativity is basically equal in everybody when they're born. It's a skill that everybody has, and we don't have people that are more creative than others when they're born, right? So the thing that we have to deal with here is how do we make ourselves more creative in the sense of a character trait, right? The second thing is place. By place, we mean a state of mind, a place in our mind, not a physical place, right? So in this cartoon with Calvin and Hobbes, basically Calvin's saying you have to be in the right mood to be creative, which is last minute panic, right? He's waiting for inspiration to come because when he panics, then he'll figure out what to do. So this isn't necessarily the best way to approach things, but can you see pretty clearly that in your life, there are times that you're more creative than other times? Yeah, there are times, maybe in the evening, you're more creative or less creative than in the morning. Maybe in the when you're drinking a glass of wine, you're more or less creative, right? When you've exercised, a lot of people, if they've exercised, they're more creative after that. Some people are more creative with the right kind of music, right? Some people are more creative when they are in a good mood and they feel happy. Would you all agree that you can see that sometimes you're more creative than other times? Okay, so this is in essence a form of magic, because we don't really understand why, we just understand that it works, right? You don't understand why you're more creative at night than in the morning. You just know that you are. But most important of all is to realize that there is a value in looking at what state of mind you're in. The third way of looking at creativity in the 4 Ps is as a product. So the product is creative regardless of the process that went into it, regardless of the state of mind we were in, regardless of the way that we are as people. The product is or is not creative. You'll experience this if you go to a gallery or a museum and you go there and you look at something on the wall and you'll say, that's a really creative painting. But you actually don't know anything about the painter. You don't know what they were doing, how they made the painting, what mood they were in, but you know it's a creative painting, right? And the same with your own work. You might do something for your work, your business, and find that that thing you're doing doesn't work out well, but you don't know what it was that made it not work. So the third thing, and I think we can all see this clearly as well, is that the product can also show us creative or not creative, right? And a mutation is the other word we're using here, that basically you're taking stuff, putting it in one end, and it comes out the other. And finally, process. Now, this is one most people are familiar with, right? There's some kind of method, some kind of activity, some kind of sequence of events that you can take on that is more creative than not. For example, sitting down at your desk and actually doing stuff is generally more creative than sleeping, right? Some people walking through the forest is a more creative activity than sitting at your desk. So all 4 of these make sense, right? They all 4 gives us something to work with when we look at what creativity is. So the question I want you to address right now is this question. Oh, before we do that, we look at process. Is this something that you guys ever experienced? The experience of a process that looks like this. Anybody, go ahead in the text box. Anybody have an experience like this when you try to do creative work? Hello, everybody. Absolutely. Okay. Anybody else have this experience? Beth has that experience too. Okay, so here's the thing, and so does Mildred. So here's the thing, guys. This is the way the creative process actually works. It's very simple, right? We perceive stuff, we conceive stuff, and we represent stuff. In other words, we take things into our brain, either from our senses or from our brain itself. So we hear it, we see it, we touch it, or we think it. We put that into the process. We put it through a thinking process in which we come up with ideas. After coming up with those ideas, we have to decide which ideas to focus on, and then we spit those ideas back out, right? Either using our senses or back into our mind where we think about it again and go through the process again. Does that make sense? Very clear, right? It's very simple, straightforward, and clear, step by step. And yet, we end up with this thing at the top. Why is that? Does anybody have a thought why it is that even though that process in the bottom is actually what's happening, we start to look like the top process? Doubt. Yeah. No confidence. Yeah. Beliefs. Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff in the way, right? See, this is why a 5-year-old scores so high on creativity tests. Thoughts get in the way. Yep. So a 5-year-old does this process cleanly. I mean, would we agree that a 5-year-old actually perceives the world more clearly than we do? And the decision-making process is cleaner as well, right? Because what gets in the way for us is the series of boxes in our heads, isn't it? That boxscape we were looking at earlier that basically defines our personality, we basically put that in place to avoid making decisions because that makes decisions for us, right? The more boxes we have rigidly there that we don't have to change, we get a personality. That personality has thoughts, right? And those thoughts, 5-year-olds are more impulsive and outside influences are not there. Exactly. Right? Impulsive in this case means they take the action they think of, right? Whereas we are regulated by the boxes that we've built ourselves and think is just the way things are, but it gives us a lot of hesitation that you guys have mentioned. It gives us a lot of confidence questions. It gives us doubt, right? So when we start to perceive things, before we come up with ideas, we are already getting confused here, right? We perceive things through a filter of our experience. The boxes we already have in our heads are limiting what we're able to actually cleanly perceive, aren't they? And the same happens in the decision-making process at the end. The 5-year-olds, and Mildred's written, the society gives us rules to fit in, so goodbye 5-year-old, right? Well, we saw earlier what happens to the 5-year-olds, right? Now, I personally have a theory from a lot of studying of this that these rules that you're talking about aren't necessarily just coming from nowhere, right? Society is not doing this. It's we that are building a society that does it because it's safer that way, isn't it? Most of the time, it's safer to follow the systems that we followed before. If you see a lion in the jungle, there is only one way, well, there's two ways to respond, right? The main correct way to respond to a lion in the jungle is you stop cold, you slowly back up and try to make yourself look larger, and you pray. That works, that's what you do. The other option is you make sure you're with somebody who's much slower than you and you run as fast as possible. So those are the only two things you can do with a lion. There's no looking around it. If you're even in the modern world now, outside in the urban world, if you're in the street and the car is coming straight at you, there's really only one good action to take, right? We don't need to be creative in these instances. See, what happens is in crisis, right, we don't need to be creative. In crisis, we need to rely on the things that got us through last time or got other people through last time. Basically made it possible for us to survive, right? So can you see how this process goes from this very clean thing to that very messy thing purely because of the fact that we have built up our personality of boxes that makes us not be able to use the process the way it's designed. Can you see that clearly? I hope so, because the basis of everything that we do from here forward is going to be based on the idea that this process needs to be given back the clarity it came with, right? Because that's what works. And if we use the process the way it was designed, we will be as creative as we were when we were 5 years old. So that big drop from 98% to 2% is all coming from the basic idea that we are building these systems in our mind that allow us to be safer. But the problem is that for the first time in history that we know of, creativity is becoming the critical skill, as we looked at earlier, right? It's becoming the critical skill that we all need to do well. So it's not just that it would be nice to have, it's now absolutely necessary to have. Does that make sense? Okay, so if we look at the 4 Ps, person, place, product, and process, I'd like you to have a thought as to which of these would make the biggest impact for you now in your project, the project you chose. And if you could type into the box or speak and say, which of these would be the most impactful for you? Jillian, Beth, Stalin, let's hear from you. Jillian says place. Beth says process. Stalin, what do you think? Stalin says product. Tubadiso says product. Okay, great. Which one of you would like to work with me quickly to explain to everybody why you chose one you chose? Tubadiso, how about you? You haven't said anything. Yes, no, hello?
Do I get to change my place to person?
You can.
I don't know. I think, I mean, what drew me to place initially was magic. And that was the word that just drew me straight away.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I then thought about magic is great, but who is it that I want to create magic with or for?
Right.
And so that's why I'm saying person. So I'm kind of torn because
here's my
yeah.
guess, Jillian, right?
Yeah.
My guess is that person is the one that you are most familiar with.
Yeah.
And therefore it feels like you could get benefit because you're good at it.
Yeah, maybe.
And the place is the one you're least good at. And therefore that also appeals because obviously we would think that the place we need the most work would be the best thing to focus on, right?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. All of you picked something, right? And I'd like you to notice that you did it again. I told you before that you would continually choose something when you should be choosing nothing. And every time I give you the opportunity, you choose something. Have you noticed that? Jillian, did you notice that?
Yes, I think we're
Yeah.
so used to doing what we're told, I guess, or trying to do what we're told, and saying no, I'm not choosing anything just doesn't feel natural. I just think it's not natural for us. We feel we have to, like when we give an instruction, we have to pick something. I mean, I felt pressured to pick something, and I felt like, well, you're told to do something, do it. And I think that's kind of almost like how we generally are. We're told to do something, we feel the pressure, we feel we're compelled to have to offer up an immediate answer, I guess.
Right, and the compelled part is you, right?
Yeah.
Because I never said you had to pick one. In fact,
Yeah.
I kind of expressly already gave you a little bit of a gentle thrashing about that a few minutes ago, right?
Yeah.
And yet, given the exact same choice, you did it again. And everybody did, right?
Yeah.
You know, all of this is really just to say that what limits our ability to be innovative, right? And that means literally at any part of the process from the beginning to the end is ourselves. We began, almost all of us, as creative geniuses at the age of 5. Almost all of us have lost that. It is the boxes in our mind that make us who we are, that give us our character and our personality and the things we admire about ourselves, that limit us in being creative now. The reason we've lost our creativity is expressly those boxes. And when we say, which of these would be most valuable, the automatic answer should be all of them. Right? When we looked at the ADIOU, the automatic answer in our mind should be all of them don't belong. Let's justify or see why that is. But my first answer is going to be all of them. But we will always try to get the right answer instead of the correct answer, because that's the way we operate, right? So again and again and again, I want you to notice how you do this in your life, that you will do this over and over and over again in the world. You will always want to come with an answer rather than a question, right? Because uncertainty is not comfortable. Uncertainty sounds unsafe, but it is actually safer to be uncertain today. Does that make sense? Jillian? Jillian?
Sorry, I lost there for a moment. I'm not physically. I just lost my screen for a moment. Yes, it makes sense.
Okay, so the most important thing about this session tonight is to really have you be clear that the limitations you experience in your creativity or your innovation skills are all based on your own limitations that you're imposing on yourself, right? And at every instance of it, it is about being willing to be uncertain, being keen, actually, being excited to be uncertain, being able to look at a list like this and say, like, I want all of those things. I'm not going to pick one to focus on. I have to focus on all. And then as you go through that process, being able to choose which one is appropriate where, right? Now, I want to review the basic principles we've dealt with in the last hour and a half. First one, everyone's born creative, right? Different ways of saying this. Brenda Ullin says all children have creative power. Picasso said all children are artists. Bottom line, we're all born creative. Secondly, as we've seen, we lose our creativity almost universally as we grow up. Yeah? Strikingly and terrifyingly so, from 98% creative to 2%. Creativity is a skill that can be relearned. Luckily, it is not something that is gone. It is something we can get back. Okay, and the way we get it back is to unlearn the things we've put in the way, right? So we've put certain box structures in the way of our creative thinking. Now we can remove the box structures or change them to make them more creative. The reason I put the iceberg there, any idea why? So I put the iceberg there to represent the balance between our conscious and subconscious minds. Right? Aha. Beth has nailed it. Yeah. So our subconscious is a lot bigger than our conscious mind, right? Problem is that as we've put together our boxes and grown into a more certain way of living, we are driven by our conscious mind, and most of us don't have a relationship with our subconscious at all. You'll find that you either tend to ignore your subconscious completely, which is more of a male thing, or you'll beat your subconscious up and complain about it and stuff, which is more of a female thing. But they both work for both genders. So in order for us to regain our creativity, we have to actually surrender ourselves, right? Not try to control things. So Julia Cameron wrote The Artist's Way. A lot of stuff that I do in this workshop is based on her work as well. And she said it very simply: the creative process of surrender. Surrender to what? It's surrender to the relationship between our conscious and subconscious minds. Yeah. So your conscious mind, subconscious mind, when aligned properly, create a very powerful situation, right? But unfortunately, none of us have them aligned properly. Basically, we're all running our lives with our conscious mind, and our subconscious is hidden away, hiding, beaten down, or lonely. It needs to be cultivated and brought out. And it needs our conscious mind to start trusting it, and our subconscious needs to start trusting our conscious mind. Can you guys see how this operates for you? How you yourself have to deal with the balance between the conscious and subconscious in a different way. So go back to this process. Have a look where in this process your project that you chose is stuck. Those of you that might have come in late, each of the people were choosing a specific project that they were going to work on for the course of this part of the workshop or the whole workshop, depending on if they're in for the whole workshop or just tonight. If you look at this process here, where in the process is your project stuck? You don't have to answer, but just think about that for now. Where is it stuck, right? Another way to look at that is this. Oh, sorry, before we go to, I'm gonna skip to that, hold on. Okay. There's another way of looking at this question, which is called circles of possibility, and it's something that we're going to go back to later in the process. There's several places where your thinking could be stuck, right? You might be stuck at the outer edge of these circles, which represents what you can actually do. So you might actually be doing all you can do, but what's having you stuck is what's actually physically possible right now. Before that is the level of ideas, right? So there's a level which you can imagine doing, but maybe your imagination doesn't take you far enough, right? So you can't imagine it all the way to where it could go. That's a pretty good block to have because it means that all you've got to do is come up with better ideas. The tighter in one is a confidence block. What do you think you can actually do, right? If you have a confidence block, it means that you don't think or believe that you are good enough to get something done. Therefore, you don't get the ideas to take it to where you could take it. Before that is fear, which is not even confidence. It's actually being afraid of something, whether it's being afraid of succeeding, being afraid of failing, being afraid of what people will think of you or any of those things. And finally, there's the energy level at which you basically stop doing anything, right? Usually, eventually, projects will get sucked down into the energy level after a while, and that's when you stop. So it's worthwhile to look at your project and ask those two questions are, where is it stuck on this process? And where is it stuck on these circles? Now I want to show you basically how the rest of this workshop works, right? First of all, just as a side point, I told you that that list of 10 skills, 5 of them are creative thinking skills. So let me show you what I mean. If you use this as the creative process, you'll see that problem solving is the whole thing. I mean, really, you have a problem at the beginning, you have to come up with a solution at the end. It's a problem solving process, right? Critical thinking comes in specifically when you're processing all the information you took in or when you're making a decision. Creativity, I think, is what they mean by ideation, basically, coming up with ideas. Decision-making is decision-making. And cognitive flexibility is what we're talking about all evening, right? The idea of being able to move around and shift your boxes. Now, another side point. Anybody recognize what this is?
It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Indeed, Jillian, thank you. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Everybody understand Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Right? The idea being that you devise this stack of things that you have to progress through. You can't really take care of your love and belonging needs when you don't have a place to live, right? Or food to eat. Anybody know where people have generally tended to put creativity on this pyramid.
Esteem, maybe?
Well, actually, that is where it usually goes, right?
Okay.
The idea is that self-actualization is, creativity is a form of self-actualization, right? This is stupid. Because would it be true that people sometimes meet their physiological challenges creatively?
Yes,
They do, right?
absolutely.
What about their safety challenges? Some people meet that creatively.
Yeah.
And what about their need for belonging? Do they meet that creatively?
Yeah, they do.
They do, right? So this whole idea that creativity is a form of self-actualization is stupid, right? I mean, we've already looked at in a way, but creativity is a skill that applies to everything in all ways, all kinds of jobs, all kinds of actions, right? And it is the skill of being able to think differently than you always think. So rather than thinking about it as thinking outside the box, as I said, encouraging you to think of it as thinking inside the box in different ways. How much can you flexibilize your boxes? What can you add to your boxes that doesn't go there before? The ultimately creative person will have a completely flexible personality in a way, right? They will be able to not be defined by what they were defined by yesterday. So the best way to become more creative and innovative is to be that flexible, to be willing to be uncertain about everything. Does that make sense? So this is the situation we actually have. Maslow's hierarchy is a stack of creativity, actually, at all levels. And even he himself said a first-rate soup is more creative than a second-rate painting, right? Which goes against completely the idea that creativity belongs in the top level. Idea that soup is more important than a painting if it's better, right? So what we do in the innovation explosion is we've take all of the basic things that we've talked about so far, and we want to work systematically, step by step, to build a different way of thinking so that we can actually restructure the boxes and create greater flexibility and more control over our process, right? Because that process we've seen is simple, and yet we mess it all up with the way we've turned ourselves into. So this is the result of a number of years of work and research. And basically, you know, over the course of 6 weeks, we go through step by step, going through building each of these steps one at a time, right? Using your project that you've chosen as a model so that you can focus on having a result each time. I'm going to show you quickly what is going to be ahead of us. You know, again, some of you are on this call just for tonight. Some of you are here for the whole workshop. So either way, have you be clear on where this goes. Okay? So again, if you haven't chosen a project because you came late or because you weren't sure, really make sure you choose one now, right? We've done the where are you stuck question. So going through this process, at the end of it, will give us a clarity around both an art and science of innovation, a toolkit of techniques. We're going to use the 4 Ps, all of them, repeatedly, right, as a way to approach creativity. And we're going to build a better relationship between your conscious and your subconscious mind. All of those things put together will give you progress on the project you're doing. But for most people, that's not the biggest benefit of the workshop, right? For most people, the biggest benefit is all the other stuff. The project itself is like an extra, right? So let me quickly show you. Oh, this should be at the end, actually. if you have the project though in mind, imagine finishing the project. We're going to come back to this. Okay, so safety is very simple. We're going to look at how do you have a safe space, safe time, safe mind, and safe environment to do your work to create a new self, right? We're looking at creating a mission statement for your project and for yourself as an innovator. In the identity section, we're going to look at basically that landscape of boxes that you've built up over your life. If you're 30 years old or 60 years old or 25 years old, whatever it is, you've built this up. We need to deconstruct it, right? We need to use it when it's useful, and when it's not, we need to make it flexible. The idea we deal with in identity is to look at how your generated identity that you choose. You like the idea of choosing your identity rather than being stuck with the one you have, right? So the generated identity that you choose is what will give you better ideas. The ideas you have are a function of who you are. So you as you are today will only get the kind of ideas you as you are today can have, right? If you want to have better ideas, faster ideas, more ideas, you need to be open to creating a new self that you generate yourself, you choose, and from there, the ideas come. Integrity is a very important step. We have to look at the values behind this so that we can then debug our project, find out what's wrong with it, find out what the assumptions are behind our project, and therefore, from doing that, we'll have a greater clarity on the identity we actually are being versus the one we say we want to be. Is this all making sense? Somebody say if it's not making sense.
Makes sense.
Great. Okay. Possibility. Basically, we're going to look at the idea of possibility thinking, which we all know and love, but we're going to get clear on where does possibility actually happen and how do we actually use it to generate more ideas. Vision, something that people often try to do at the beginning of things, we put at the end. So the idea is that vision is a decision-making step, and a vision statement is, you know, for companies and NGOs and so forth, is always based on what is the world going to be like at the end. So vision statements are very visionary, right? And we want to look at, for your project, how do we pull it forward using a vision, right? And we end up with this weird kind of dynamic of a chart that basically, this is kind of the whole process. If you cut the pyramid from the top, this is what you get. You get, you know, your identity. Safety gives you a safe ring around it. Your identity gives you who you are. From there, your integrity gives you what you do, and your vision gives you what you have. Brings it back to your identity again in possibility, and that is the process. However, the last thing we deal with is connection, which is actually this, right? How do you connect to yourself? How do you connect to your ideas? How do you connect to other people? How do you connect to the world outside you? How do you get your project to happen in the real world, right? Customer, audience, and the other thinkers around you. We look at specifically how do you do that with your project, right? This is one of my favorite quotes in the world, Jeff Goins. Any fool can make a point, a truly creative person makes a connection. So that's the other kind of connection we want to deal with at this point, right, is how do we actually connect to others and ourselves in a real and authentic way. Okay, so that gives us the full pyramid of this process. So it's, you know, those people who are actually doing the full workshop, it's tonight and then 6 weeks and then a final week, which we'll have in January, which is about completing and reporting back on what you got and how the project is doing and so forth, right? I'm hoping that we'll be able to get more interaction as we go forward. It's very hard to do this session tonight is easier, but it's hard to do a lot of the sessions if we don't have the interaction, because it really is about you applying some of the concepts to what you're working on, and that's where breakthroughs happen and where people have real insights, right? What I'd like to ask you before I go to the last bit of this is if I showed you that picture of the Golden Gate Bridge again, which is terribly misplaced and really should have been at the end. The idea is to imagine that picture of a broken little stuck bridge now suddenly looking like this, right? And this is what I want you to imagine for your project. Your project, which is stuck and not moving, if you had to visualize it looking like this now, would you be able to do that? If you could, again, speak up or type in the box, would you be able to do that and how would it make you feel? Hello, hello. Beth, what about you? Beth, are you there? You're definitely going to be able to do that, okay? And how does it make you feel to visualize that? Excited, good, okay? Can you give us a little glimpse of what that looks like? Jillian says, I'm already envisioning it. I'm struggling with how to get there. Okay, you're struggling with how to get there. Excellent.
Sorry, I just thought it'd be easier for me to talk.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think I'm at the stage where I've got all the great ideas and I just need to buckle down and get my project done. But I'm excited because I want to change the world in some way or form. And that's, I feel, yeah, that once I start making these small steps forward, I'm going to be able to start doing that.
Okay. So what does it look like to you? The project you've chosen, what is it and how does it look like when you visualize it looking like this?
So the project is finishing my online course, which, yeah, I've already got started getting everything. I'm now at the stage where I just need to get the content done, which is the part that I'm struggling with the most. And I know I already have ideas why I'm struggling with that based on, you know, that sort of imposter syndrome and things like that. But once that gets done, I'm going to be able to scale my business and I'm going to be able to make a valuable business for me and my family. So that looks like a dream come true, really.
Okay. So where did you find, looking at the circles of possibility, where do you find you're stuck?
So like I say, I've got the ideas, but I'm stuck at the, I wrote it down at probably the represent stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in other words, you've got the ideas, but you don't know how to get them out.
Pretty much, exactly. I have all the ideas. It's just now the follow through and getting all that information that's inside of me out into something that's valuable and can be used by people to change their lives.
Got you. So if you were to then look at this one, where is it stuck on the represent stage? Where is it stuck on this chart?
So I had I'd looked at, what's the first one again? It was either physical or confidence. I mean, I am a pretty confident person, and I've been doing a lot of work already on subconscious beliefs and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's that next stage of getting out of your comfort zone, and it's bringing up sort of like, what do you have to add type things. So getting past that, really.
Got you. So there's a level of confidence there that you need to up, in other words.
Exactly.
Which, look, you know, for me to do this course, I've realized that, you know, I have to continually up that, right?
Yes, of course. And I think it's something you will be working on throughout your life. I mean, but it's just, it definitely is something that I can see from what you've been saying will stop you from actually getting the creativity that you need, because it just means that you kind of get stopped in your tracks. So
yeah, absolutely. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. So everybody else can see how you apply that to getting clear where you're stuck, right? So, I mean,
yes.
today has really been about just getting a basis of understanding what is the world we're dealing with, right? And, you know, then we will be going through these steps, and it happens fast. It seems like it's slow, but next thing you know, we're at the top and we're done, right?
Yes, and for me personally, like I already had in my mind that I was giving November and December to get this content done. But like you said, then you start putting that pressure on yourself. But if I've got a step-by-step process that I'm going through, I do feel like it's going to open up my mind, and that's kind of why I signed up to do the whole thing. So
fantastic, right? So yeah, so just to be clear, like I said, those people who are here for the whole workshop, this is what we'll be doing going forward. Those people who are not here for the whole workshop, you are still welcome to spend the first week. You're still welcome to spend the first week with us. During, this is the first time I've done this. During the week, I'm gonna have a daily email that you're gonna get, which will give you one exercise for the day that can allow you to make progress in a very simple kind of micro learning way, right? So that weeks of emails will come to all of you who are on this call, even if you're not gonna be in the workshop the whole time. If you decide to get into the workshop and join us for the rest of it, you know, I'll let you know how to do that as well. I don't want to use up our time now, but I'll get you a mail that will tell you how to do that if you're interested. And I guess a couple of important things to be clear on is that all of these sessions are recorded, so you can always go back if you miss it, or you just want to go back and hear stuff again. It's all in the folder that those of you who have joined the workshop will, you know, already have the link for. All of it goes into that folder. And again, those of you who haven't, I'll send you the link for this recording anyway, so that you have this one. So here's the first day homework. It's free writing, okay? Free writing is something that some of you may have done. Some of you probably journal. It's not journaling. Free writing is basically you trying to not think. So here's how it works. You sit down with a pen and paper. At first, I definitely don't want you to do it on your computer. It needs to be done by hand at first. Ideally, you do it very first thing in the morning when you wake up, with almost no time between waking up and doing it. And you write 3 pages. The reason 3 pages, it just seems to be about the right length to make sure that you get into a state of flow, right? The 3 pages that you write will basically get you through, and you will then be able to do it, you know, more easily some days than others, but basically some days you'll need the 3 pages. Some days you might only need 1 page. But as a system, it's best to always aim for 3 pages. If, of course, you use a smaller notebook or whatever, you would have more pages. So the basic bottom line of it, though, is you want to do this as if your hand and your brain are different. You're not thinking, you don't stop and think about what to write. You don't, you know, cross things out and fix them. You literally are writing as fast as possible, and it doesn't matter what you write. In fact, the very first day you do this, you should not even look at what you wrote. I would like you to throw it away, burn it, use it to paper a bird cage, whatever it is that you can do to make sure that it's not going to be read. Why do I say that? I say that because the idea here is to start to rebuild your relationship between your conscious and subconscious minds, right? This is the easiest and fastest way to do it, and also a very easy and fast way to ruin it, because your conscious is calling your subconscious to come out and play, right? If your conscious mind starts to read the stuff, it's going to start judging it. And once it starts judging it, it inevitably is going to chase your subconscious back into its cave, where it will feel worse than it did before, not better. So the idea here is to do this every day for the next week. Again, regardless of whether you're going to be in the long-term workshop or not, do this every day for the next week. Have yourself go through that process. If you miss a day, okay. If you can only do 2 pages, okay. You know, if you don't do it first thing in the morning, you do it before you go to sleep, okay. The main thing is to do it every day. Ideally, do it the way it's designed. And the most important thing in that, after doing it, is to do it without thinking. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm going to assume that it makes sense to everybody, because nobody's telling me.
Makes sense, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, so that is session 0, right? Ground 0. We have about 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, things you want to bring up, things you want to share? You can speak them, you can type them.
Maybe I just want to share, I mean, there was a lot of value that I got out of today. I think for me, the one thing I wrote down that like really stood out for me is just be willing to be uncertain and flexible about everything. And that for me is the one, probably the most powerful statement I've heard in a long time. And it really spoke to me. Everything else was great and valuable too, but for me, that really spoke to me and to where I am in my life right now. And that for me is my power statement that I got out of today, my major takeaway.
That's, you know, that's great, Jillian, because actually that would be the thing I would hope you would get out of today. Right? And for you, with what you shared earlier, you know, it's very important. Okay. It's very important because you are talking about earlier how you know, look at these decisions you have to make and you're worried that you're not going to be enough to make them, right?
Yes.
And that really is a discomfort with uncertainty, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, because I think you do know at heart that you are good enough, but you don't like the idea that it's new stuff that you haven't had to deal with yet. Because you're used to the other stuff, and that other stuff then that you already have to deal with, you can cope with because you know the landscape, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
So that's fantastic, because if you really can embrace that uncertainty, it'll make a big difference right now.
Yeah, and I think I'm very rigid in my thinking, and also I think that I'm not very flexible, and it's either black or it's white for me. There's no in between, and this for me has really just been like, get out of your comfort zone. And this is the strongest statement for me, is that get out of, you know, what's that definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again and never really, and I think that's exactly what I've been doing. And this challenges me to get out of that, repeating the same habits.
Absolutely. Fantastic.
Get comfortable with it. So thank you for that.
Hooray. Okay, anybody else like to share before we complete the session? Anybody else?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Hey, Michael, thank you. It made me really look inward on what I've done in the past, and especially I'm a person that's always been very motivated and advanced thinker. I've lived my life with uncertainty, and that's what has made me so creative. So you really have brought out the thought process on why my uncertainty has made me be so successful in life. So thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate it. Give it to John.
Hi, Mike. From a perspective of an elderly Caucasian male, I found it to be not only interesting, but opening my mind to a point that it's okay to be a different thinker as you age, and especially in your elder years. And it was very interesting, and thanks.
Come on, Mildred.
Okay. You have any, are you going to go too? Make it. Okay. All right, great. So, I mean, we're 3 or 4 minutes early, which is always fantastic. So if nobody else has anything else to ask or share, just look forward to seeing you guys in a week, those of you who will be here, and look out for your mails. They'll start coming tonight. They're designed to arrive to you in plenty of time before the morning, depending, you know, so if you're crazy and you wake up at 3 in the morning, you'll already have it. So they're designed to come in the night. Now, if you're in the States, obviously you're going to get them at like dinner time. So those are for the next day, right? But as I said, for the first week, you guys will all be able to get the mails and participate in that. So enjoy. Thank you very much for being here for 2 hours and giving your attention and time. And hope that we're going to have a good 2 months together, those of us who will be here. Anything else, guys?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, here we go then.